On Wednesday?
I don't know. We got to figure out, what our plan is. Okay, our whole starting five looks worn down to me.
There you go. Vogel saying Hibbert looks worn down. Perhaps the entire team looking worn down. Here's the question: who or whom is responsible for their collapse? Stephen A.
First of all of them are to some degree. There are a multitude of bigger culprits in all of this, however. Roy Hibbert's a culprit because he's opened his mouth and he has said what he said. I applaud his honesty, his candor. I genuinely like Roy Hibbert. But at the same time, you can't talk what you talk and then be handed the ball 5 times in the game's first 9 minutes and miss all 5 of your shots after calling everybody out in your 7 feet 2. It just can't happen. It just can't happen.
Plus he had
It's 0 points. You talk the talk.
Yeah.
You got to walk it.
Yeah.
And that's not what he's done. That's not entirely his fault. But you've got to do that. Mm-hmm. The other person who is a major culprit in all of this is Lance Stevenson. I'm a fan of this kid. This kid can play. Brooklyn, New York, Lincoln. He can ball. Got a lot of heart. Okay?
Yep.
Tremendous talent. Great upside. He's just young. It's nothing to crucify him about or whatever. But here's the problem. He's playing for a new contract.
Yep.
Paul George already got his. And there's friction. Not that they dislike each other, because they don't dislike each other. Not that they don't talk to one another, because they do talk to one another. But if you Paul George and you got this money, you got a ball. And since he's been sporadic, Lance Stevenson, he's got 2 issues. Number one, he's a rough rider. He ain't scared of anything. And he's going to step on the court and say, damn it, if y'all ain't going to do it, I'm going to do it. And he's going to try too much. He's going to make mistakes along the way because you try too hard because he wants to win that badly. But just as badly as he wants to win, he also wants to get paid. And he doesn't want to sit there and watch dudes who have already gotten paid messing with his money by not producing the way they're supposed to be producing. Therefore, the team is not as successful, and as a result, it cost him his money. That's his problem. And so that's part 2 of it. Part 3 of it is that because he has a problem with losing and with his money being jeopardized, Lance Stevenson is going to speak up. And he's not going to speak up in the most diplomatic of ways. Let's just leave it at that. And as a result of that, you're going to get in George Hill's face. You're going to get in Paul George's face. You're going to get in Roy Hibbert's face because all of them are making at least $8 million par. and Lance Stevenson ain't there yet. So this is going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem. So, again, you've got that. Then there's the Frank Vogel issue because you're the head coach. You're young. But you got to handle this. You got to handle this internal strife. I'm not saying he's wrong, because Frank Vogel is telling the absolute truth when he tells you fatigue sets in, because he was actually thinking, and my sources have told me this, but I'm glad he confirmed it when he was interviewed last night. He was actually thinking about sitting down Roy Hibbert before the game, because he thought he had been worn out, but then decided to try and put him out there, and then quickly recognized this man needs to sit down for the night. All of them need rest, personally. They had 18 games in the month of March thus far. The month of March. 11 were road games, or at least 11. They're spent, physically and emotionally. But the bottom line is they're not playing good basketball. And because of that, something is going to have to give. So you got Vogel, you got Hibbert, you got George, who's got to play like a star, and you've got the Lance Stevenson element in terms of his play, his contract, and his ability to communicate with the team. Ultimately, it's not a good situation to be in, and I'm here to tell you something right now. I don't turn around relatively soon, Vogel might be in trouble. Brian Windhorst was absolutely right when he pointed out what he pointed out. Regardless of what Larry Bird, Donnie Walsh, any of those guys say, this is a first-class organization. They know what they're doing. Frank Vogel is a great young coach, got a lot of promise.
Yeah.
But when you have this kind of collapse, and you combine that with the fact that he wasn't necessarily Larry Bird's guy to begin with, okay? It was Jim O'Brien, right? And he got the job that way.
He did?
Because Jim O'Brien was let go. It's a lot.
And we'll talk
It's
about
a lot
that
to deal with.
at the top of the hour.
Yes.
And when you say turn around quickly, this team is looking like a second-round exit right now.
I'm not going to lie to you, Skip. They're looking like a first round.
First-round exit?
They look like, and if that happens, not saying it will, because I still believe they will get to the Eastern Conference Finals. But if they got bounced out in the first round, I don't think Frank Vogel survives.
No, there's no way. I want to say again, I have never, ever seen anything like this collapse this late in the season happening to a contending team. I remind you, last night, this team with the best home record in the NBA got blown out in the first quarter by an Atlanta Hawks team clinging to the playoffs, an Atlanta team that had recently lost 6 in a row. And the only reason Atlanta is clinging is because Carmelo hurt his shoulder. That's just me. I think Carmelo, if he'd been right, they would have beaten Washington the other night.
Sure.
I don't know if they beat Miami, but they would be right on Atlanta's tail. That's another
They'd be a
discussion.
game out instead of 2.
They'd be a game out.
They'd have
I
lost
would
to Miami.
agree. If we're doing blame pie here, I got to cut the biggest piece and leave it on Paul George's plate.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why. I think this all started when he went into his slump. This is a man who has superstar potential. I think everybody was poised for him to elevate into the superstar stratus when the season started. And I think he's regressed in his slump. And we've talked about his off-court distractions that help lead to his slump. He's the guy. He's the go-to guy. He's that guy you just talked about. When it's time, you got to give him the ball and get out of the way, and he wins the game. When he started not being able to do that, all of a sudden, all the dominoes fell backward because Roy Hibbert did talk a lot. He's an eloquent man, and I think he was right about what he said, that he was pointing fingers at people who are selfish. He didn't name names, I don't think, but
No, he
we
didn't.
know where he was probably pointing the fingers. And then he couldn't back it up on the floor. And when you point and then you can't back up, you got big locker room issues. Frank Vogel is overmatched right now with this team. It's way over his head to try to correct this. He was desperate last night, so he benched Roy for the rest of the game, and Roy pouted at the end of the bench and came out a little late to start the second half. So everything's on notice now, and it brings us back to Larry Bird. The players know that Frank was not a Larry guy. So the players are they got doubt in their psyches about their head coach because the big guy upstairs, they know, is not really on board with our young head coach. So it leads to the issue. Should Larry Bird walk downstairs, say thank you but no thank you, and take over this team? I'll tell you why he won't do it, because he's too shrewd to do it. It's such a mess right now. I don't think even the great Larry Bird, who proved he could really coach as well as be a GM, but I don't think even the great Larry Bird taking a seat on the bench would turn this around.
Let me be very, very clear. Larry Bird needs to stay his butt right upstairs. He don't even think about coming downstairs. Because you ask anybody that knows, Larry Bird was a great, great all-time basketball player. Larry Bird, I believe, to be a very good, if not a great executive. When you consider this, he built this team, and you consider the brawl at the Palace in Auburn Hills and how this stuff had to be resurrected. The Indiana Pacers as an organization, as a town, as far as I'm concerned, is first class all the way. Love it. Actually, love going there, to be quite honest with you. I love everything about him. But I got to tell you something. Larry Bird has no business even thinking about being a coach. And if he did, it would be an absolute joke. When Larry Bird was the coach of the Indiana Pacers and they went to the NBA Finals, everybody and their grandmama knows it was two people coaching that team. It was Dick Harder coaching defense, it was Rick Carlisle coaching offense. And what Larry Bird did was, he was the figurehead, he was the overseer, and he was somebody that was a master motivator. That's what he was. But in terms of doing the actual work, there's a reason that Rick Carlisle is doing what he's doing in Dallas. I'm so sick and tired of, I never, ever, ever hear anybody stand up and just acknowledge. We act like it's a passerby thing. Rick Carlisle, yeah, he's all right. Rick Carlisle is one of the best coaches in the NBA. This man coaches his butt off. It's just that simple. And so that was who was on your bench, okay? And that's not to disrespect Larry. Larry's an executive.
I think you just did this.
No, I'm saying Larry Bird has no business coaching. I'm going to repeat myself just in case I stutter for America. Larry Bird needs to stay his butt upstairs. He needs to stay his butt right upstairs as the president of basketball operations. He needs to stay his butt right upstairs, picking talent, making the decisions, controlling the organization.
So
from
you
an
think he was
overseas
an awful
perspective.
coach?
No, I don't think he was a coach. I think he was a figurehead.
I do think he was a coach.
Please.
And maybe I got different sources than you got. Because my sources, all through that year, that 98 year, when I was in Chicago with the Bulls who were scared to death of Larry Bird and company,
No.
they're like, Larry Bird is pulling all the right strings here.
No. I'm not trying to imply that. When I'm talking about motivation, when I'm talking about guys that actually, go into a game and giving you and maxing their effort. Oh, no, I'm not.
What are you, the coach of the year?
Yeah,
I
he
think
was. I'm not questioning that about Larry Bird. I'm simply saying, from a schematic perspective, understanding the nuances, what to do. I'm saying to you, Dick Harder and Rick Carlisle had a profound impact on that team, that organization, and it made Larry Bird. Larry Bird might as well have been chilling at a country club. That's how much of a well-oiled machine they were with Reggie Miller and all of those boys. Larry Bird is an overseer. He is a guy. I want him.
What do you think people say about Phil Jackson?
Wait a minute. They can say what they want about Phil Jackson. Here's the argument that Phil Jackson has. Michael Jordan, as great as he was, never won a title until I got there. Kobe Bryant and Shaq never won a title until I got there.
An overseer, not an X's and O's guy.
But what I'm saying to you is that when you look at the triangle offense, he was the only guy that was doing it.
Yep.
So it was his offense.
But who was sitting on his bench the whole way? Tex Winter was sitting on his bench and he installed it.
Tex Winter installed it.
Yeah.
Phil Jackson obviously was a master manipulator as it pertained to managing personality.
Sure.
You talk
So
to
was
Michael
Larry
Jordan.
Bird.
Yeah. I'm saying if that's what you're talking about, that's fine. But you're talking about elite stars with eccentric individuals like the Dennis Rodmans of the world and others. I'm telling you, the Pacers don't have that. They got a bunch of young bucks on their squad.
Who is sitting on that bench? Nate McMillan.
Oh, well, Nate McMillan can coach.
Okay, what I'm saying, if you paired Larry Bird with Nate McMillan, I'd like my chance.
You want Larry to come down.
I'm just saying, he won't do it because I think it's too much. It's a disaster.
I'm saying to you, it doesn't. I'm not trying to act like Larry Bird coming down would be to the detriment of the Pacers. Please don't get me wrong. I'm just simply saying that the work is done by other people. I don't look at a guy. I don't think Frank Vogel's somebody that needs to be gone. He's a bright young coach. He's going through it. He's going through it for the first time, just like anybody else was.
Supposed to go through it, yeah.
He's supposed to went through it. So be patient. Frank Vogel's got a lot of promise. He can handle it. I don't think you need